Hosted by you/smarteffort8150. I have one son, Henry, aged 12. Henry is best friends with a boy named Archie, aged 14. It has always been clear that Archie comes from a troubled home. From what I can gather, and I do not have the full details, Archie's mom is a substance addict, and Archie has been on the at-risk register for a long time. Honestly, I don't know why it has taken this long for them to decide he should be moved into foster care. Last Friday, I received a call from my son's school. They said they couldn't discuss the matter with me but asked if I would consent to having my information passed on to Archie's social worker. I agreed, and shortly after, I received a call from his social worker explaining that a section something or other was being put in place, which meant Archie would be removed from his home and placed into foster care. I was told that the school had recommended me and was asked if I could take him in, essentially. They said it would likely be long-term, until he turns 18. I honestly didn't know what to say. I was in shock. I have been unofficially supporting Archie for a while now. I pick him up from his house and drop him off at school with my son. He spends many weekends at my place. On the days he doesn't come over, I make sure to pack him something to eat when I pick him up because he told me his school lunch is often his only meal of the day. I buy him soap and deodorant, and I even wash his clothes for him. But supporting him in this way and fully taking him in are two very different things. I'm a single dad. I have a decent job, but I'm far from well off. I live in a small 2-bedroom house, which means Henry and Archie would have to share a room, something they already do when Archie stays, but only for short periods. Plus, there's the immense responsibility of taking on another child. I was told there's a shortage of foster carers in the local area, so if I don't agree to take him, it's likely he'll have to move to a different county and school. I don't want that to happen. I had already planned for Archie to stay with me over the 2-week Christmas holiday, so I asked for time to think about it and said I'd give them a firm answer in the new year. They agreed. Archie hasn't been informed about any of this yet. I've been trying to give him as normal a Christmas as possible. My heart is telling me, of course, you're going to take that little boy in, but my brain is worried about the responsibility and cost of having another mouth to feed and another boy to clothe. At the same time, I keep thinking about Archie's situation. He's already had such a rough start in life, and I know he needs stability and care more than anything else. I can't bear the thought of him being uprooted again, losing his school, his friends, and the small sense of normalcy he has here. I keep asking myself whether I can truly give him what he needs, and I don't know if I have all the answers right now. I've always taught Henry the importance of kindness, and I see how much he cares about Archie too. Part of me feels this might not just be about me taking on more responsibility, it's also about giving Archie the chance to grow up with a sense of love and belonging. So, I suppose I'm left balancing what's practical with what feels right in my heart. And I'm leaning toward saying yes. I spoke to my mom about it, and she thinks it's an awful idea. She's worried I'm biting off more than I can chew, especially as a single dad. She reminded me that I already have a lot on my plate with work, the house, and raising Henry on my own. She said taking in another child, especially one with a difficult background, would add stress and might affect my ability to provide for Henry properly. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell she's afraid this might make life harder for all of us, including Archie. I understand her concerns, honestly, I do. But I can't imagine turning him away when he needs help the most. I told her I haven't made a final decision yet and that I need to think about what's best for everyone involved, not just what's easiest. And I haven't even discussed any of this with Henry yet, which will be a huge factor in my final decision. This has been a huge rant, and if you've read it, thank you. I just needed to get this out somehow. Update 5 days later. I just wanted to give an update and say a huge thank you for all the responses. I genuinely didn't expect to receive so many replies, especially to something that was just meant to be a rant to get my emotions out. When I was asked to take in Archie, at first, I felt honored. Then, I felt worried about everything. I am quite an anxious person in general, and my thoughts were flooded with concerns about whether I'd be good enough to support Archie in the way he needs. I love my mom, but she didn't help. I think I get my anxiety from her, although she has it on a much higher scale than I do. Every possible thing that could go wrong, she was texting me about all week. You're already stretched thin with work and Henry. You won't get one-on-one time with Henry anymore. How will you afford everything? These are real concerns, and I'm glad she brought them up because they gave me the opportunity to think about how I could mitigate them. A few of you mentioned the fostering allowance, which I knew about, but I couldn't find any concrete information on how much it would actually be. Every source online seemed to give a different answer, but none suggested it was very much. However, as some of you advised, I called the social worker's office and said I was seriously considering taking in Archie, which they were thrilled about, but I needed to understand the finances first to see if it was feasible. They said they couldn't provide exact numbers, as every case is different and it isn't decided until a placement is found. However, they told me the minimum would be around £190, about $240 US, per week, and that it would likely be completely tax-free. Additionally, I'd receive a significant discount on things like council tax. That was honestly a lot more than I expected and much higher than most of the figures I'd seen online. They also put me in touch with some other foster carers who answered my questions, which was incredibly helpful. This week has been very busy. I worked out my finances, added the estimated fostering allowance, and calculated how much Archie would likely increase my expenses. It worked out that I'd actually have a surplus compared to my current situation. Many of the foster carers I spoke to don't work full-time, using the allowance to supplement their income. I'm not sure if I want to do that, but they mentioned it helps to work part-time since fostering involves a lot of work, meetings, reports, and other responsibilities. On top of that, I'd need to complete training during the first year to become fully qualified. I considered it, and with the additional allowance, I could move to a 0.6 contract, working 3 days per week, while still covering the costs of moving to a 3-bedroom house. While that would leave me with slightly less disposable income, it wouldn't be a significant reduction. I've spoken with my work, and they said they'd support me if I decided to do this, but I haven't made a final decision. I don't want it to seem like I'm taking advantage of Archie's allowance. After sorting out the finances, I needed to talk to Henry. This was honestly the most important part of my decision. If Henry said no, I'd struggle to go ahead with it. I took him out and explained the situation. I didn't go into the details of why Archie is going into care, as it's not my story to tell, even though Archie himself has been open about his rough home life. I discussed the potential challenges, less one-on-one time, less privacy, at least in the short term while we find a bigger house, and so on. Henry was incredibly supportive. He said that he and Archie had talked about how they both wished Archie could come and live with us. I told him not to mention anything to Archie yet until I had the chance to speak with him, and he agreed. Yesterday, I arranged for social services to come over. Archie, his social worker, and I sat down to talk. They told Archie he was going to be placed in foster care. Archie cried a lot, I cried a lot, and he asked to see his mom, which the social worker said they'd arrange as soon as possible. In that moment, Archie didn't seem like a teenager, he seemed like a small child whose world was crumbling. Then they asked Archie if he'd want to stay with me. Although he was still distraught about being in care, he said he'd love to stay with me. We discussed what it would mean and how it would affect us. Afterward, Archie and his social worker spoke privately, and then the social worker and I talked. They expressed how thrilled they were about my decision and said they were pleased I planned to move to a bigger house soon, as Archie would need his own space, which I fully agree with. Normally, the boys spend most of their time upstairs playing Xbox, but later that day Archie came down and asked if we could watch a movie together. He sat next to me, rested his head on my shoulder, and said, "Thank you for letting me stay with you." Writing this, I can feel tears welling up in my eyes again. I put my arm around him and said I'd always be there for him. Today, Archie seems a little down, which is entirely understandable. I honestly expected him to take it harder than he has. To cheer him up, we're going to see the new Lion King movie, even though I hate those live-action films, but this is for Archie, and then going out to eat, letting the boys choose where. I might return in a few months to give an update on how things are going. For now, I'm just hoping everything will be okay. I know the first few months will be the hardest. Thank you, everyone. Editor's note. Stealing this comment from you/effective cricket 93 to explain what type of fostering is involved here. It depends. This is called a friends and family placement in England, where social services have decided it's in the child's best interest to be placed with a familiar person rather than in a traditional foster placement. Friends and family placements can have a looser set of restrictions compared to traditional placements. However, OP would only be cleared to take in Archie. For example, he wouldn't be able to take in another child unless he decided to undergo full training. They would be able to make decisions that differ from those in a traditional foster home. For instance, social services have to weigh factors such as, there are no local foster homes, meaning his schooling would be disrupted, and he would lose his friends and support network. How would that impact him, against the fact that he would have to share a room? Especially considering that Archie has already been regularly sharing a room. Social services would focus on what's in the child's best interest, which might allow them to make some concessions.